It was a drizzly afternoon in Seoul, the kind where the city's neon lights blurred into the gray sky like forgotten promises. Elelliana Moore, 32 years old and a former senior strategy consultant at Blackridge Investments in New York, had been scraping by on freelance gigs since moving here 2 years ago. The move was supposed to be a fresh start after I got blackballed for calling out racial bias at my old firm. Standing up for myself as a black woman in a white-dominated boardroom had cost me everything. Now, I took whatever came my way: temp advising, data analysis, anything to pay the rent on my tiny apartment in Itaewon. I was nursing a black coffee at a quiet cafe near Gangnam, scrolling through emails on my battered laptop, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional Korean-accented English. "Ms. Moore? This is Ms. Lee, personal secretary to Madam Kong of Kong Global Holdings. She requests an urgent meeting at the Latte Hotel in 30 minutes. It's regarding a high-level consulting opportunity." My pulse quickened. Kong Global was a behemoth: tech, investments, real estate spanning Asia and beyond. Opportunities like this didn't come often for someone like me, especially not in a city where my skin color often raised eyebrows before my resume did. I agreed, smoothed my simple black blazer over my blouse, and hailed a taxi. The ride was tense. I rehearsed my pitch in my head, reminding myself to stay composed, to not let any microaggressions rattle me. At the hotel, a uniformed attendant escorted me to a private lounge on the executive floor. The room was opulent: marble floors, dim crystal chandeliers, a faint scent of orchids. Seated at a polished mahogany table was an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, dressed in a tailored silk hanbok-inspired suit, her diamond earrings catching the light like tiny daggers. Her eyes were sharp, assessing me from head to toe as I entered. This was Madam Kong, mother of the CEO and the real power behind the throne. She didn't stand or offer a handshake. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the chair opposite. I complied, keeping my expression neutral. Without preamble, she leaned forward, her voice low and laced with urgency. "I need you to help my son. I'm worried, he's confused about his sexuality." The words hit like a slap, freezing me in place. This wasn't a business consultation. It was something far more invasive, and I was the unwitting pawn. I stared at Madam Kong, my mind racing to process her words. Confused about his sexuality? The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud, but she wasn't done. With a manicured hand, she slid a thick manila folder across the table toward me. "Take a look," she said, her tone clipped and authoritative, as if she were ordering a subordinate to fetch coffee. I opened it slowly, my fingers steady despite the knot twisting in my stomach. Inside were glossy photos of her son, Kong Minho, mid-30s, sharp-suited, captured in boardrooms and at galas. Notes scribbled in the margins, meetings with male associates circled in red, vague rumors from staff. But it was her next words that sliced through me like a blade. "I'm not hiring you as a consultant, Ms. Moore. I'm hiring you to test him. Get close. If necessary, make him fall for you. Then I'll know the truth." She leaned back, crossing her arms, her eyes appraising me like merchandise. "You're a black woman, strong, exotic, different. Perfect for drawing out his inclinations. Prove he's straight, or expose the lie." The room spun for a moment. Exotic? Different? She wasn't seeing me as Elelliana Moore, the strategist who'd navigated multi-million-dollar deals at Blackridge. No, I was a tool, a racial stereotype to bait her son. The humiliation burned, echoing the boardroom betrayals back in New York, where my voice against discrimination had labeled me troublesome. Here, in this gilded lounge, I was reduced to a prop in her twisted family drama. I closed the folder with deliberate calm, pushing it back. My voice was even, betraying nothing. "I see." Inside, rage simmered. I'd fought too hard to be anyone's experiment. But I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch, my dark eyes unyielding against her cold stare. She blinked first. "You'll start tomorrow as his temporary secretary." Discreetly. I nodded once, the agreement tasting like ash. I didn't explode. Years of navigating corporate minefields in New York had taught me that. Back at Blackridge, when I'd called out the exec who dismissed my ideas because black women are too aggressive, I'd learned the hard way, outbursts only fueled their narratives. So, I sat there, the folder heavy in my hands like a weapon turned against me. Madame Kong's words echoed, strong, exotic, different. Code 4, you're not one of us, but useful for this dirty work. My skin prickled, a familiar heat rising in my chest, but I forced it down. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack. Slowly, I closed the folder, the pages whispering shut like a secret I refused to keep. I placed it back on the table with deliberate care, my fingers lingering just a moment too long. "I understand," I said, my voice low and measured, each syllable a shield. No elaboration, no questions. Just those two words, laced with the calm that comes from knowing I'd already started plotting my escape, or my revenge. I stood, smoothing my blazer, and offered a polite bow, adapting to the Korean custom I'd picked up in Seoul, even if it felt like submitting. "Thank you for the opportunity," I added, though the words tasted bitter. Madame Kong's eyes narrowed, expecting more, perhaps a plea or indignation. But I gave her nothing. As I turned toward the door, the room's opulence felt mocking, the chandeliers twinkling like judgmental eyes. I paused at the threshold, hand on the knob, and looked back. Our gazes locked. Mine wasn't pleading or hurt, it was steel, a silent promise. "You think you've hired a pawn? Watch me checkmate you." The air seemed to chill, her composed facade cracking just a fraction. I closed the door softly, the click echoing my resolve. Tomorrow, as her son's temporary secretary, the real game would begin. 3 days later, I stepped into the gleaming lobby of Kong Global Holdings headquarters in the heart of Seoul's business district. The skyscraper loomed like a monument to power, its glass facade reflecting the bustling streets below. I adjusted my ID badge, temporary, of course, and reminded myself why I was here. Madame Kong's opportunity had morphed into this farce, posing as her son's secretary to test him. The humiliation from our meeting still lingered, a bitter aftertaste, but I needed the paycheck. At 32, with my career in ruins back in the States, I couldn't afford pride. The HR manager, a brisk woman in her 40s named Ms. Kim, led me to my desk. It wasn't in the executive suite as I'd half hoped. No, it was tucked away in an auxiliary reception area on the 3rd floor, right next to the door of a dusty archive room. The space was cramped, a small table, an outdated computer, and stacks of filing boxes that smelled faintly of mildew. "You'll handle overflow calls and basic admin," she said curtly, handing me a login code. "Madame Kong arranged this personally, but don't expect special treatment. We're short-staffed, that's all." I nodded, settling in. No one knew the real reason I was here, Madame Kong's twisted experiment. To them, I was just another temp, an outsider with dark skin and an American accent, probably hired for diversity optics or worse. Whispers started almost immediately. As I logged into the system, 2 young employees lingered by the coffee machine, their voices low but audible. "Look at her," one murmured in Korean, assuming I couldn't understand. "Heard Madame Kong pulled her in for some shady stuff. Probably spying on someone." The other snickered. "Yeah, or climbing the ladder the old-fashioned way. You know, the kind that doesn't involve actual work. With that skin? Exotic import for the boss's entertainment." My fingers paused on the keyboard. The words stung, echoing the racist jabs I'd endured at Blackridge, being called affirmative action hire, behind my back. But I kept my face neutral, focusing on the screen. I wasn't here to make friends, I was here to observe. And observe I did. From my vantage point, I caught glimpses of Kong Min-ho, the 35-year-old CEO, striding through the lobby. He was polished, tailored suit, quiet confidence, but his eyes darted away whenever his mother appeared in the halls, a subtle tension in his posture. What secrets was he hiding? Or was it all in her paranoid mind? I dove into the mundane tasks, filing reports and answering queries, all while mapping the company's dynamics in my head. They thought they had me pegged as disposable. Little did they know, I was already planning my way out, or up. The whispers didn't stop at the coffee machine. They followed me like shadows through the sterile corridors of Kong Global. By my second week, I'd mapped out the office hierarchy, the executives on the upper floors who barely noticed me, the mid-level managers who eyed me with suspicion, and the admins who gossiped freely, assuming my limited Korean shielded me from their barbs. But I understood enough to know I was the outsider, the exotic import Madame Kong had planted. That afternoon, the call came over the intercom, temp secretary to conference room 19, bring the quarterly reports. My heart steadied, this was my first summons to the executive level. I gathered the files, double-checked the bindings, and rode the elevator up. The doors opened to a sleek boardroom, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline, a long glass table ringed by suited figures. Kong Min-ho sat at the head, his expression focused on a tablet. Madame Kong wasn't there, but her influence lingered in the air. As I entered, the room fell into a hush. Mr. Park, a paunchy director in his 50s with a perpetual scowl, head of operations, I'd learned, narrowed his eyes at me. "What's this?" he barked in English, laced with disdain. "They letting just anyone up here now? Even types like you in the boardroom on floor 19? The words landed like a punch, types like you dripping with unspoken racism. A few chuckles rippled from the others, mostly men, a couple of women averting their gazes. No one defended me. I felt the familiar burn, the echo of Blackridge where a white colleague had once sneered, "We don't need your kind stirring trouble." But I didn't flinch. I walked to the table, placed the reports down with precise movements, and met Mr. Park's stare. "Yes, sir," I replied calmly, my voice even and professional. "I'm here at Madame Kong's direct request." The room stilled for a beat. Mr. Park snorted, leaning back. "Well, aren't we special? Probably just eye candy for the old lady's schemes. Don't get too comfortable, temps like you don't last." More laughter, sharper this time. My nails dug into my palms under the table, but my face remained a mask. I'd survived worse, this was just another test of my resolve. I nodded politely. "Understood. If that's all?" Without waiting for dismissal, I turned and exited, the door clicking shut behind me. Back at my desk, the anger simmered, but so did my plan. They underestimated me, good. It would make the reveal sweeter. The meeting dragged on after Mr. Park's jab, the air thick with unspoken judgments. I lingered at the edge of the room, as instructed, ready to fetch more documents if needed, but my mind was already dissecting the discussion. They were reviewing a merger proposal with a Japanese tech firm, numbers flying across the projector screen. Min-ho led the talk, his voice steady, but I noticed the subtle flaws in their data projections, overly optimistic revenue forecasts that ignored market volatility. Then it happened, midway through Mr. Park's droning presentation, the projector flickered and died. The screen went black, plunging the room into frustrated murmurs. "What the hell?" Mr. Park snapped, jabbing at the remote. "Tech team, get up here now." The others shifted uncomfortably. One exec tried rebooting the laptop, but it only worsened, error messages popping up about incompatible drivers. Minutes ticked by, the meeting grinding to a halt. I watched from the corner, my fingers itching. At Blackridge, I'd troubleshoot worse during high-stakes pitches. Tech glitches were just puzzles to solve. Finally, unable to stand the inefficiency, I stepped forward quietly. "May I?" I asked, my voice cutting through the chaos without raising it. Mr. Park glared, but Minho nodded curtly, his first direct acknowledgement of me. I approached the setup, ignoring the skeptical stares. A quick glance revealed the issue, a mismatched HDMI cable and outdated firmware clashing with the laptop's OS. I unplugged, rerouted through an auxiliary port, and typed a few commands into the projector's admin menu, bypassing the error with a simple reset sequence I'd learned years ago. The screen hummed back to life, displaying the exact slide they'd lost. The room exhaled collectively. Mr. Park muttered something under his breath, but the chuckles from earlier were gone. A few nods of reluctant approval rippled through. Minho, however, paused, his dark eyes locking onto mine for the first time, not with dismissal, but genuine curiosity. "How did you know that?" he asked, his tone measured, almost impressed. "Just experience from past roles," I replied softly, stepping back. No need to elaborate on Blackridge or the late nights fixing crises for ungrateful bosses. I retreated to my spot, heart pounding not from nerves, but satisfaction. They'd seen a glimpse, not the eye candy they assumed, but the strategist beneath. Minho's gaze lingered as the meeting resumed, a spark of interest that Madame Kong would no doubt twist to her narrative. But for me, it was a crack in their armor. I retreated to the employee break room in the basement after the boardroom incident, my steps echoing in the dimly lit corridor. The space was a forgotten corner of the skyscraper, faded vending machines humming softly, mismatched chairs around a scarred table, the faint smell of stale coffee and instant ramen clinging to the air. It was worlds away from the polished executive floors above, a reminder of where they thought I belonged. I sank into a chair, pulling out my worn notebook to jot down observations, Mr. Park's hostility, the other's silence, Minho's lingering gaze. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of holding back. An older janitor, Mr. Choi, shuffled in, wiping his hands on his overalls. He was in his 60s, with kind eyes etched by years of unseen labor. He poured himself a cup from the communal pot and glanced my way. "You're the new temp, right? Elelliana? You handle that projector like a pro up there. Where'd you work before this? Your fingers fly on those keys like you've been in the game forever." I smiled faintly, closing my notebook. "Just picked up a few tricks along the way," I replied, keeping it vague. I didn't owe explanations to anyone here, not after the way they'd treated me. But his genuine curiosity softened something in me. In Seoul, where I often felt like an anomaly, a black woman navigating a sea of uniformity, small kindnesses like his were rare anchors. In my mind, though, his question unlocked a floodgate. I was once more than a temp fetching files. Back in New York, I'd been a rising star at Blackridge Investments, a powerhouse firm handling billion-dollar deals. I'd started as an analyst fresh out of Columbia Business School, climbing the ranks through sheer grit. By my late 20s, I was leading strategy sessions, advising on mergers that reshaped industries. I remembered the thrill of closing a 9-figure funding round for a tech startup, the boardroom cheers that followed. But it all crumbled when I spoke up. It was during a performance review. My boss, a smug white exec named Harlan, had passed me over for a promotion, citing team fit issues. I knew the real reason, my pushback on a discriminatory hiring policy that favored cultural alignment, code for excluding people like me. I filed a formal complaint, backed by emails and witnesses. Instead of justice, they turned the tables. Fabricated reports of insubordination, anonymous tips about conflicts. I was out within weeks, blacklisted in the industry. "Too outspoken," they whispered. As a black woman, my voice was a threat. That's why I fled to Seoul, anonymous, rebuilding piece by piece. Freelance gigs kept me afloat, but the scars remained. Mr. Choi's words stirred them now, a reminder that my skills hadn't vanished, they'd just been buried. I wouldn't let Kong Global bury them further. "Thanks for the coffee tip," I said to him, standing. As I left, resolve hardened, It was time to unearth the real me. The emergency meeting erupted like a storm in the executive suite that afternoon. I'd been summoned again, this time not for coffee runs, but to deliver backup files on the merger leak. Whispers of a data breach had the whole floor buzzing, sensitive details about the Japanese tech acquisition had surfaced online, threatening millions in negotiations. I slipped into the room quietly, files in hand, positioning myself near the door as the chaos unfolded. Minho paced at the head of the table, his usual composure cracking. At 35, he carried the weight of the company on his shoulders, but today it showed, jaw clenched, fingers drumming the glass surface. "How the hell did this happen?" he demanded, his voice sharp, echoing off the walls. The tech team fidgeted, one engineer stammering about firewalls and audits. "We've scanned everything, no traces," another protested. Mr. Park, ever the opportunist, jumped in, "This is incompetence. Heads will roll if we don't plug this now." I stood silent, observing. My time at Blackridge had taught me to spot patterns in crises like this. Leaks weren't always hacks, sometimes they were human errors buried in logs. As the arguments escalated, Minho slammed his tablet down. "Enough. If no one can trace it, we're blind, call in external forensics." That's when I stepped forward, my heart steady despite the stares. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the din like a calm blade. I placed the files on the table and pointed to a highlighted section. "If you're hunting the source, check the RM204B log printed from room 648 hours ago. The print system lacks a secondary encryption layer. Anyone with access could have snapped a photo and walked out." The room froze. Eyes darted to me, then to their screens as they pulled up the log. Mr. Park's face reddened. "Who are you two?" But Minho held up a hand, silencing him. He scrolled through the data, his expression shifting from frustration to realization. "She's right. The timestamp matches the leak's first trace." "How did you know?" The air thickened with shock. I met his gaze evenly, unflinching. "I'm the one who brought your tea this morning." No elaboration on my past analyses at Blackridge, no plea for credit. Just the truth, delivered with quiet authority. He blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing his features, not disdain, but intrigue. As the team scrambled to confirm, his eyes followed me when I retreated to the door. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. The crack in their facade widened, and I felt a surge of quiet power. They thought me disposable, now, doubt seated. The morning after the merger crisis, I arrived at my cramped desk early, the basement break room's stale air still clinging to my clothes from last night's reflections. The office hummed with its usual rhythm, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, but something felt off. My inbox blinked with a new message from HR, subject, temporary assignment suspension. I clicked it open, my breath steady despite the twist in my gut. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required due to internal disruptions. Please clear your workstation and exit the premises by noon. Thank you for your contributions. No explanation, no severance. Just a polite dismissal, stamped with the company's logo like a corporate guillotine. I leaned back, the cheap chair creaking under me. Disruptions? My contributions had just saved them from a multi-million-dollar leak, but apparently, that made me a threat. A young assistant from upstairs, Jiun, barely out of college, hovered nearby, pretending to sort files. She glanced around before whispering, "It's because of yesterday. You're making Mr. Kong uncomfortable. He doesn't want his mother meddling this deep, and, well, you're stirring things up." Her words confirmed it, Madame Kong's scheme backfiring, or perhaps Minho sensing the manipulation. Either way, I was the scapegoat. The anger I'd buried since New York surged, being ousted again for being too competent, too visible as a black woman in spaces not built for me. But I didn't lash out. Instead, I nodded calmly. "Understood. Thank you for the heads up." I began packing, my notebook, a few pens, the outdated tablet I'd brought from home. No company property, I'd been careful. As I wiped the desk clean, memories flashed, the Blackridge fallout, where Speaking Truth had labeled me disruptive. Here, solving problems did the same. Fine. If they wanted me gone, I'd leave a parting gift. On my tablet, I opened the file I'd been drafting in secret, proposal_x_conglobal.pdf. It was no hasty scribble, a comprehensive strategy overhaul, pinpointing inefficiencies in their global expansion, suggesting data-driven pivots that could boost revenue by 20%. I'd pulled all-nighters analyzing their public reports, drawing on my old expertise. I attached it to an email addressed to the entire executive team, including Minho and Madam Kong. In the subject, final contribution. Body, a single line. Since retention isn't an option, perhaps respect is. This is for the company that deserves better. Send. The confirmation pinged like a quiet victory. No pleas, no bitterness, just proof of what they'd lost. By noon, I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed for the exit. Heads turned, whispers followed, the temp's out already? I ignored them, stepping into Seoul's crisp air. The rage peaked inside me, a storm I contained. They thought me dangerous? Good. This wasn't goodbye, it was the setup for their reckoning. 3 days after I walked out of Kong Global's doors, my phone buzzed incessantly in my tiny Itaewon apartment. Ignored calls from unknown numbers, then a voicemail from Jiyoon, the assistant who'd warned me, "Elelliana, you need to check your email. The proposal, it's everywhere. The execs are freaking out." I sat up on my threadbare couch, the city lights flickering through the rain-streaked window. Curiosity overrode my resolve to sever ties. I opened my laptop, logging into a dummy account I'd set up to monitor fallout. The inbox was flooded, internal forwards leaked somehow, but that wasn't my concern. The subject line screamed, "Urgent, review attached strategy overhaul." My proposal had gone viral within the company, circulating like wildfire. I clicked on a recording someone had anonymously shared, a grainy video of the emergency board meeting. Minho stood at the head, projecting my document onto the massive screen. The room was packed, Mr. Park slouched in his chair, Madam Kong absent but her shadow looming. "This isn't just a fix," Minho said, his voice laced with awe as he scrolled through my analysis. "It identifies our core vulnerabilities, over-reliance on Asian markets, outdated data pipelines, and proposes a pivot to AI-integrated global expansion. Projections show a 20% revenue spike in 18 months. Who authored this?" Silence blanketed the room. Then, a tech analyst piped up, fumbling with his tablet, the metadata traces to a device ID EB14. "That's the temp secretary's tablet. Elelliana Moore." Murmurs erupted. Mr. Park bolted upright, face flushing. "The one we let go? That outsider?" Another voice, from HR, "Wait, her resume, she was a senior strategist at Blackridge Investments in New York. Handled massive mergers before, some scandal pushed her out." The camera caught Minho's reaction, his hand froze on the clicker, eyes widening in realization. Not anger, but regret, deep, dawning regret. He rubbed his temple, muttering, "We dismissed her. For what? Being too effective?" The room shifted uncomfortably, whispers of "How did we miss this?" and Madam Kong's pet project backfired. I paused the video, a quiet triumph swelling in my chest. They'd seen me as disposable, a tool in their games. Now, my work forced their eyes open, poring over my insights, scrambling to verify the data I'd meticulously compiled from public filings and insider glimpses. Minho's gaze in the footage lingered on the screen, as if searching for me. The boardroom's stunned faces said it all, the temp they'd ridiculed had just exposed their blind spots. All eyes were on my ghost now. That evening, as rain pattered against my apartment window, I imagined the fallout unfolding miles away in the Kong family penthouse. Unbeknownst to me, Madame Kong had slipped into her son's private study, the door clicking shut behind her like a confession waiting to escape. Minho sat at his desk, the proposal still open on his screen, his fingers tracing my executive summary. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows over shelves lined with corporate awards and family photos, reminders of the empire he'd inherited. She approached quietly, her usual commanding presence softened by hesitation. "Minho," she began, her voice uncharacteristically fragile. He looked up, surprise etching his features. "Mother?" "It's late." She didn't sit, instead placing a hand on the back of his chair. "I owe you an apology." The words hung heavy, a rare admission from a woman who'd built her influence through iron will. Minho's brow furrowed. "For what?" "For Elelliana." She sighed, pacing slowly. "When I first met her, I saw potential, intelligence, humility, courage. Qualities this company needs. But I didn't trust them fully. I brought her in under false pretenses, thinking she'd clarify things for me about you. I let my fears cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I undervalued her. Pushed her into a role beneath her, just to test waters that didn't need stirring." Minho leaned back, processing. "You hired her to spy on me? To test my preferences?" His tone sharpened with betrayal, but she held up a hand. "Not spy, observe. But yes, it was misguided. And now, look at what she's given us. That proposal isn't just smart, it's visionary. We dismissed her too quickly, and I bear the blame." Her eyes glistened, a crack in her armor. "I thought I was protecting you, the family. Instead, I drove away someone who could elevate us all." He stood, rubbing his temples. "Where is she now?" "I need to reach her, apologize, bring her back." Madame Kong reached into her pocket, unfolding a small sheet of paper. "You don't have to search far." She handed it to him, my handwritten note from the dismissal day. "I don't need forgiveness, only for you to grasp what's truly valuable. E." Minho read it twice, his expression shifting from regret to determination. "She deserves more than words." Madame Kong nodded, a quiet alliance forming. "Then make it right. For the company, and for her." As she left, the rain outside intensified, mirroring the storm of change I'd unleashed from afar. The morning after Ji-eun's voicemail, my inbox lit up with an urgent summons: "Emergency virtual board meeting, your attendance required." No sender name, just the Kong global domain. I stared at the screen in my apartment, the cursor blinking like a challenge. Part of me wanted to delete it, to walk away from the mess they'd created. But curiosity, and a spark of vindication, won out. I'd exposed their flaws, now they'd have to face me. I logged in from my laptop, dressed in a crisp black vest, hair pulled back to project the professionalism they'd ignored. The virtual room filled quickly, Minho at the center, flanked by execs on split screens. Mr. Park looked flustered, avoiding the camera. Madame Kong appeared in a corner tile, her expression unreadable. No pleasantries, the meeting dove straight in. "Ms. Moore," Minho began, his voice steady but laced with humility I'd never heard from him. "Thank you for joining. Your proposal has reshaped our perspective. We've verified every projection, it's not just solid, it's transformative. We were fools to let you go." The words hung in the digital ether. I kept my face neutral, though my pulse raced. "I'm glad it was useful," I replied evenly. But I didn't send it to beg for reinstatement. I sent it because Kong Global deserves strategies that match its potential, not outdated biases holding it back. Murmurs rippled through the tiles, agreement from some, discomfort from others. Mr. Park shifted, muttering, "This is irregular. She's an ex-temp." Minho cut him off sharply. Irregular? She pinpointed leaks we missed and charted a path to dominance. That's not temp work, that's leadership. He leaned closer to his camera, eyes locking on mine through the screen. Elelliana, I'm offering you the role of Chief Strategy Advisor. Full authority, direct report to me. No games, no tests, just the respect you've earned. The offer stunned the room into silence. Madame Kong nodded subtly, her earlier confession echoing in my mind. I paused, letting the moment stretch, feeling the power shift. They'd reduced me to a pawn, now, they needed me as a queen. I accept, I said finally, my voice firm. But on one condition, no more shadows. Transparency from here on. Minho agreed without hesitation, a genuine smile breaking through. As the meeting wrapped, screens blinking off one by one, a quiet thrill coursed through me. This wasn't just a return, it was reclamation. They'd learn what a black woman scorned could build. 3 weeks after that virtual meeting, I stepped back into the Kong Global headquarters, not as a temp lurking in the shadows, but as Chief Strategy Advisor, with an office on the executive floor overlooking the Han River. The transition was swift. My new role came with a corner suite, access to proprietary data streams, and a team of analysts reporting directly to me. No more cramped desks or whispered slurs. As I walked the halls that first day, heads turned, not with suspicion, but deference. The receptionist stood to greet me, "Good morning, Ms. Moore," their voices laced with a respect I'd earned through fire. Even Mr. Park averted his eyes in meetings, his bluster deflated since my proposal had spotlighted his department's oversights. The change was palpable, a quiet revolution in the air. Madame Kong sent a formal welcome note, acknowledging my contributions without revisiting her scheme. But it was Minho who bridged the personal gap. He didn't overwhelm with apologies or grand gestures, instead, a subtle routine emerged. Each morning, around 9:15, he'd appear at my door with 2 mugs in hand. "Black coffee, no sugar?" he'd ask, his tone casual but attentive, remembering my preference from that fleeting boardroom exchange. I'd nod, gesturing to the chair across my desk. We'd sit in companionable silence at first, sipping as we reviewed overnight market reports or brainstormed tweaks to the expansion plan. Words weren't always necessary. Our shared focus built a bridge over the past's chasm. He'd listen intently when I outlined risks in the AI pivot, his questions probing but respectful, no more assumptions about my place. In return, I'd catch glimpses of him, the weight of family expectations, the loneliness of leading an empire. "You've seen through our blind spots," he said once, mid-conversation. "Not just the business ones." The habit deepened. Afternoons, we'd walk the rooftop garden during breaks, discussing everything from Seoul's startup scene to my New York days, carefully skirting the painful parts. Trust grew in those moments, unspoken but solid. No romance yet, just a foundation, him seeing me as an equal, me allowing vulnerability after years of walls. The office noticed, the whispers shifted from scandal to admiration. For the first time in Seoul, I felt anchored, not adrift. This wasn't victory, it was reclamation, one quiet coffee at a time. The rumors started as whispers in Seoul's tabloids, creeping into boardroom chatter like unwelcome guests. CEO Kong Minho dating former temp, one headline blared, accompanied by grainy photos of us exiting the building together after a late strategy session. Another article speculated wildly, exotic hire turns romantic? What's her real agenda? The subtext was clear, my skin color, my lowly start as a secretary, made me an anomaly, a scandal waiting to explode. Anonymous online forums dissected it, she's just using her looks to climb. What else does a woman like that have? I felt the sting, a familiar echo from New York where my achievements were always questioned through a racial lens. But I didn't hide. In meetings, I'd catch sidelong glances from execs, wondering if the coffee chats with Minho were more than professional. He noticed too, his jaw tightening during our rooftop walks. Ignore them, he'd say softly, but I saw the protectiveness building. It culminated at the quarterly shareholder meeting in the grand auditorium, screens glowing with profit charts from my implemented strategies. The room buzzed with investors, old money types in tailored suits. Midway through Q&A, an elderly stakeholder, Mr. Tanaka, a longtime partner from Japan, stood, his voice amplified. Impressive growth, but let's address the elephant, your new advisor. Is she qualified, or just diverse window dressing? We need substance, not optics. The room tensed, murmurs rippling. My cheeks burned, but I sat straight, refusing to shrink. Before I could respond, Minho rose from his seat at the podium, his microphone crackling to life. Mr. Tanaka, he said, his tone ice-cold and commanding, if you're questioning Elelliana's expertise, the mind behind the 17% revenue surge you're praising, then perhaps question your own place in this company's future. We don't tolerate baseless attacks here. Substance? She's delivered more in months than some have in years. Silence crashed over the auditorium like a wave. Mr. Tanaka sat down, red-faced, no rebuttal. Applause trickled from a few allies, growing into nods of approval. Minho glanced my way, his eyes fierce with solidarity. Later, in the hallway, he pulled me aside. I meant every word. You're not fighting alone anymore. In that moment, protection became mutual. I'd shield the company with my strategies, he'd guard my dignity. The rumors faded, replaced by respect. For once, being seen wasn't a vulnerability, it was strength. The quarter's end brought a quiet triumph that echoed through the halls of Kong Global like a subtle shift in the wind. The earnings report flashed across every screen, a 17% profit surge, the highest in years, directly tied to the strategies I'd outlined in that fateful proposal. Analysts credited the AI pivot and streamlined global ops, my fingerprints all over it. Whispers in the elevators turned from skepticism to awe. That advisor's a game-changer. No one mentioned the days I'd fetched files or endured their slights. The temp label had evaporated, replaced by boardroom nods and invitations to strategy retreats. Madame Kong's transformation was the most unexpected. She'd kept her distance at first, her apologies confined to that private confession with Minho. But one evening, as I wrapped up a late session modeling next quarter forecasts, my phone chimed with her personal invite, dinner at the family estate in Hanamdong. I hesitated, old wounds from her scheme still smarted, but curiosity won. The drive there felt surreal, Seoul's lights blurring past like stars aligning. The estate was understated elegance, manicured gardens, warm lanterns guiding the way. Madame Kong greeted me at the door, no longer the icy matriarch, but a woman softened by reflection. Dinner was intimate, Minho joined, the three of us around a low table laden with bulgogi and banchan. Conversation flowed easily, business first, then lighter, her tales of building the company from scratch, my guarded shares of New York hustles. As dessert arrived, fresh fruit and tea, she set her cup down, eyes meeting mine with unexpected warmth. Elelliana, she said softly, when might you allow me to call you, daughter-in-law? The question hung, laced with hope and a hint of mischief. Minho froze mid-sip, his gaze darting between us, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. I felt a warmth spread, not anger, but amusement at the irony. The woman who'd once used me as a tool now saw family potential. I smiled gently, bowing my head in quiet acknowledgement. Time will tell, I replied, leaving it open, a door ajar rather than slammed. We parted with hugs, the night air crisp with possibility. Back home, I reflected, from basement breaks to boardroom power, from pawn to partner. The scars remained, but they'd forged something stronger. Minho texted later, "Thank you for coming." It meant everything. I didn't reply immediately, savoring the shift. Life in Seoul, once a refuge from betrayal, now held promise, not just professional, but personal. Open-ended, like the city itself.